This show does not provide medical advice. If you're having a medical emergency, please call 911. Anything you hear here should be discussed with your primary health care provider. Hello, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the radio show produced by Passionate World Talk Radio, whose goal it is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. I'm Marianne Matzo, and for the next 30 minutes, I am your host. So today, I'm going to be talking with James Kawainui. Oh, James, I screwed it up already.
It's okay.
Help me with your last name.
It's okay. My last name is Kawainui.
Kawainui.
Yeah.
And he has this beautiful middle name that I was practicing and still never quite got. So, James, can you tell me about your middle name?
My middle name is Pwrnetworkllc.
And what does that mean?
You break it down into pieces, and Lani is heaven, and Pwrnetworkllc is a fragrance, or the flower. Pwrnetworkllc, the fragrance of a flower, and Ali'i is chief or royal. And so when you break my name down, it basically say is he who brings the scent of heaven to earth.
Wow, that's pretty cool, isn't it?
I always thought that it was, So it's this idea that we have this connection to heaven, and that is a beautiful connection. And so there
really is.
Yeah, my responsibility of helping people understand that connection.
Well, I was just thinking, no pressure there, James. Just bring us the heavenly scent.
You talk about no pressure, and it was a really interesting thing because when I was a child, before I was a year old, I actually got a very rare form of cancer, and I actually got my cancer from the vaccine, but it was called spastic quadriplegia, and I was actually paralyzed. And the doctors at the Shriners Hospital on Kapiolani in Honolulu basically said, they told my grandma, they said, let him go. There's nothing we can do for him. He's going to die, because my body was shutting down. And my grandmother, in her infinite wisdom and her love for me, basically looked at the doctors and said, I don't think so. And she came to the hospital every night with her bottle of homemade coconut oil. In Hawaii they would ground the coconut and squeeze the oil out themselves, and she lomi'd me back to life. In other words, she massaged me back to life. She did it for a few weeks, and after about 2 or 3 weeks, I started to get movement back in my body, and I slowly recovered. I wore double leg braces till I was 4 years old, and suffered a bit of neurological impairment on the left side of my body. So my left side is a little bit weaker, or always has been. And dexterity-wise, but other than that, I've lived a pretty full life. So I did some past life work, or some work with someone when I lived in New Zealand, and I stayed. I realized that I stayed because I wanted to renegotiate my contract, because just like you said, no pressure for the job that you got given in this lifetime.
So what did your doctors have to say about your rebirth?
Well, I'm not sure, because nobody ever said anything about it, because after a couple of months she took me home, and I just lived with her, and I grew stronger, and I just went back to the doctors, and then they just monitored my improvements, I mean, I was in a Shriners outpatient clinic till I was about 7 or 8 years old. And I would go back once a year for checkups.
So you've lived pretty much in a lot of different countries, and you're from Captain Cook, Hawaii, and now live in Arizona. And
now live in, yeah.
You're in Arizona No? Yes?
Yes, I am.
Okay, good. I want to make sure I was talking to the right James. And one of the things that you and I were talking about was that you're a lineage carrier. The Kahuna, your relatives, do they guide you or do they give you information? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the lineage carrier in lots of different ways, because my family goes back in Hawaii over 20 generations, and they were the I'm going to say it because and I don't usually say it this way. They were the Kahuna. They were the priests. They were the people that understood energy. They were the mystics and the healers and the advisors to the royal court. And that was my lineage. And so my kupuna, which the Hawaiians say kupuna, are your ancestors or your elders. And so your elders can be in still living or past. Mm-hmm. And the easiest way for me to explain how they work through me is like if you were looking at, if you were to draw a triangle on a piece of paper with the tip of the triangle pointing at the top and the triangle at the and its base, I stand at the tip of the triangle, and it's as if they all speak to me through me for whoever it is that's working in front of me. And then when I say that is and I don't get like visions or things like that, but there are thoughts and things that come in or things that I know without knowing that they show me about people, about where their pain is in their body, some of the experiences that they've had in their life, some of the stories or the behaviors that they've carried from generation to generation. And there is a lot of that, actually, that we are just starting to understand. That generational behavior, that generational patterning, you know. We think that we just inherit physical features, you know, color, hair, stature, body shape, and everything else like that. But we also inherit some of the trauma and some of the things that have happened to our ancestors, and when they are very traumatic, they show up in our everyday life as things that we do, you know.
So James, is it the intergenerational trauma that's getting handed down to you along with your hair color and your eye color, or is it a process of rebirth, and you're bringing back that trauma with you?
The way that I was shown this through that connection, and the way that I came to understand this, is that, you know, hair color and body structure and in some ways even our physical health come through as pieces inside of our DNA. Mm-hmm. And so we inherit the DNA strand. So the DNA strand basically is our genetic makeup. It's the way that we are made, the things that make us, right? And when we have traumatic experience in this lifetime or in past lifetimes, it's a major shift in frequency and vibration. And so with the work that you've done, you understand what shock is. So you can tell when a person's body goes into shock. You see the trembling. You see the hot and the cold. People talk about being very cold when they're in shock. There's confusion when people go into shock. What I've come to understand of this, and I may not be in the mainstream or have the same thoughts as other people, but in that moment, because of whatever has happened, was so traumatic that the vibration and the frequency of the person energetically changes. And when it changes, it not only travels through the physical nature, but it also goes down into the genetic structure, and it will actually alter the genes and in some ways, when it's very traumatic, it alters the genes and permanently alters the genes so that the memory of whatever that is stays inside the body. And again, I'll give you an example. I worked on a woman about it was almost 7 years ago, who came to see me, and she had a sore left knee, and nothing that she did fixed the knee. Doctors told her knee was perfect. Everything was fine in her knee. And when she came to me, we did some work, and in one of the sessions we got through to this place, and we saw it's like this understanding that comes in of a grandmother 4 generations before who had hurt herself and lost her knee. And the crazy thing, when I said that to her, she said, my mom and my grandmother and my sister in my family, we all have the same knee. We all have knee problems. And I know that sounds kind of crazy and fantastic at the same time, but that's the way trauma works in a person's body.
And so, given that that's a trauma from 4 generations ago, could you go about fixing that, and what did you do?
In the recognition inside of her body that it wasn't her pain, it wasn't her trauma, it wasn't her suffering to carry, the body was actually able to release it. And it pretty much released it the same way that we see when people go into shock. She started shaking. She got hot and cold. And for about 10 or 15 minutes, she was actually confused. And then when she checked back in and she realized that her knee was felt differently, she realized something that had happened. And when she got up off the table and then she left, and her knee, I wouldn't say that it never hurt her again, but what happened was the way that it had been hurting her and what had been happening to her, not disappeared, but it never showed back up again. Because in that moment, the vibration and the frequency inside of the person changes.
I see.
And we don't realize how much we carry that are other people's energy. And in that moment, realizing that was somebody else's energy that she didn't need to carry anymore, that person, that soul, was able to let it go. And that's kind of the work that I see and I do with a lot of people that come to see me. Is it that dramatic? Not always that dramatic, but when I work with people that have been abused, and it's the same thing, that idea of that.
Well, I've done sexual health counseling in the oncology population, and one of my favorite books is something like The Body Remembers. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, The Body Remembers.
And it's just so fascinating what the body can store. And then these women go for surgery, to remove the cancer from their female organs. And I have seen over and over again the total decompensation. And family members will say, I'll ask, was she ever sexually abused? And they'll say, yeah, but she was a little kid. She's over that now. And I always think, no. The body remembers. This is a new trauma. This is somebody going down there with a knife. This is all part of that, And it's incredible the responses that people can have, that women can have to that surgery or the radiation, just the violent entry of their body, even though it's for a medical reason.
Yeah, I've helped women through that, and I say this, and I've said this for years. Our body is a repository of all the things that have happened to us, and in my work, I've come to look at it this way: we have 3 levels of memory. We have the memory of the things that have happened to us in this lifetime. We have the memory that are passed down to us through the generations, through our ancestral lineage. And then we also have soul-level memory, things that we carry and happen from lifetime to lifetime. And this may not be the place or the time to talk about that, but that's part of the process. And so when I can find this, and this is something that I've learned, is that all pain is emotional. All pain is emotional. And if we can find the pain or understand what the emotion behind the pain is or was, then we have an opportunity to shift that, to change that.
I can see that. So do people, James, need to come to you in Arizona in order to be treated, or can you do this kind of thing over the telephone?
Oh, I actually haven't seen anybody in person in, over a year. And it was primarily because of COVID, but I was also already switching to an online platform. I have clients on 5 continents now. And people find me, and I do my sessions on Zoom, so we connect through that way, so that we can see each other. Because I tell people, when you do deep healing work like this, there has to be a level of trust. Because until someone trusts that process and themselves, and they feel safe, they're not going to be able to go into that space inside of themselves. So it's about creating that level of trust. So to answer your question, yes, I actually do it online now, and I have for quite a few years now.
That's incredible. Now, we were talking before in our, maybe in our last 10 minutes here, we were talking before how you can help people in terms of making the transition from this life to the next life. Do you have any words of advice for our listeners in terms of what that process is all about?
Yeah, and I'll start by saying this. We spend an inordinate amount of time either trying to change things that have happened that we can never change because it's already done, or we spend more of our times, I think, worried about what's coming or what the future is. And I say this to people. I say, you have 100% of your energy that's available in every moment. If you're spending a certain amount of time, say 25% or 30% of your time worried about things that you've done in the past that you regret or are guilty of, or however you look at it, and then you spend time worrying every day about what's going to happen, which may never happen, but we're putting energy into it. And we just say that maybe that's 25 or 30%. So half of the energy that you have available to you to live your life in this moment, you're not using because you're giving it away to two places where you can never change or do something about. And so what I talk to people about is about how can I live in the present moment? How can I be aware of where I am in this moment, what my thoughts are in this moment, how I feel in this moment, and then what do I do in this moment? And so then the process becomes, how can I start to reel my mind in? Because that's really what happens. My mind, our minds are amazing because we can be sitting in a room and yet be experiencing something that happened in the past, or being, one of my teachers used to say, in the Bahamas. You can just disappear inside that space. And in that moment, we miss the passage of time in this present moment, right? And right now and me being present helps me make the choice of what to do next, and then what to do next, and what to do next. So I guess the thing would be, how do we start to take back control? That's one way of looking at it. Or how do I learn not to let my mind control my thoughts in my day? If I'm living in fear, then I will always be thinking that I have to be wary or aware of the things that are around me, which means that I'm spending my time focusing on the things that may hurt me instead of going, wait a minute, here I am. I feel my body. What does my body feel like? Am I breathing? Right? Because most of the time, our society and the way that we live has taught us how to live in the constant state of fight or flight. So our bodies are in a constant state of fight or flight. That means we're always on alert. We are always vigilant of something happening to us, and it kicks in the survival gene, the survival understanding that we have, which is I'm either going to have to fight or run in this moment. And on a physiological level, it is devastating to the body because that's people talk about chronic fatigue. People talk about just not having the energy or the strength to live their lives. And it's because our bodies are in this way. Physiologically, what happens is we increase our heart rate, our blood pressure goes up, my breath gets shallow and short. Or ever been afraid and realized that you're holding your breath? Mm-hmm. And most people do that. Most people live their lives now from a place of holding their breath until their body overtakes the mind and then goes, breathe, 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 and then they're doing it. But they're not doing it consciously. And that increased heart rate also increases cortisol, which makes the cells wear out faster. I mean, we could talk about the science of this all day long, but the reality is that how do I shift this? And the shifting of this is to come back into my present moment. So how do I do that? And the easiest way that I can say to people is, have you ever sat and become very physical and very clear or focused about your breath and takes, just like now? We can play with this right now, right? For the people that are listening to this, just stop for 10 or 15 seconds, and all I want you to do is breathe. Feel your breath as it does that, right? So I feel my breath as it goes through my nose. I feel my breath as it goes down the back of my throat. I feel my breath as my lungs expand and contract. And just do that. Your total focus is on your breath, not in what's going on in your mind right now, but actually in the breath itself. The act of breathing. Feel the air. I am breathing in. I feel the air. I feel the air in my chest. I'm breathing out. I feel the air coming out. Whatever else shows up in my mind in this moment as I'm focusing on my breath, I do my best to let go of. I notice the breath. I notice the whatever my thoughts are. I acknowledge them, and in my mind there's a choice, and I say I'm going to go back to focusing on my breath.
When I would walk into work, I would always do the walking meditation of Thich Nhat Hanh.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with. I breathe in because I know I am breathing in, and I breathe out because I know I am breathing out. And so you just do that as you walk. And I would do that walking to work and then walking back to my car.
Yeah.
And actually, since I've retired, I don't think I've done it at all.
Oh, well, good. Maybe this is the reminder to start that again. You know.
Yeah, I think so.
But if we can do that, then we can give ourselves the space to do that, and if we can commit to doing that several times a day, especially when we know we're going to be in stressful situations. or if we know that like there's a phone call that I'm supposed to make that I don't want to make, there's a meeting that I need to go into that I know this is going to happen, and so I start to anticipate the meeting, that and how I'm going to feel and what people are going to say and everything else, and so there I am creating things that haven't happened yet, and I walk into that meeting as like I walk in with guns drawn, going, okay, who's going to mess with me because I'm going to mess you up, right? And there's no space inside of that for us to communicate because I've already got a predetermined idea of what's going to happen. And we do this to our day, every day. And so if I can take a step back and go, wait a minute, I have a choice in this moment of how I want to feel. I have a choice in this moment of how I want to be. And literally wrestle control of my mind and the thoughts that it's creating back so that I can actually be more in control. And even if more in control means great, I get to focus on my breath in this moment, and then I get to make a choice of what I want to do next.
And do you think we always have a choice about what we can do next?
Yes. Yes. Our lives change.
Nothing is beyond us.
This is my philosophy.
Okay.
Our lives change. Our lives change when I realize that life is not happening to me. Because if I keep looking at everything happening to me, I didn't get this job because this happened to me. This person's treating me this way. This is my lot in life. So I guess I don't get to have a loving relationship, right? Or however we want to think about that. Every time we do that, what we're doing is we're giving our energy to whatever that thing is and saying, you're more important than I am. And every time we do that, what we're doing is we're looking at it from the victim mentality that says that I am not in control of my life. All these things are happening to me. When I change that, when I can change that understanding and say, wait a minute, I have a say in what happens. I can make a choice. So this person, let's put it this way. So someone is angry, and all their anger is being projected at me. Do I need to take that anger on? Is it my responsibility to respond or react to that anger? If they're angry, does that have anything to do with me? But most of the time what we do is we react to whatever that anger is with anger itself. And there's no control over that. What I look at it this way. Every time I react to something outside of me, I just given my energy away to that thing, which means that I have no power inside of whatever's happening. And I say that's not true. That's not true.
So James, what I was thinking about was like people who are chronically ill, where they have a lot of things happening to them all the time. They're, cut into, they're in chemo, they're in radiation. They don't really have control of the situation. How do they manage that then with your model?
I'm going to say something that may be very controversial in this moment, and I'm going to say everything that's happening to them in that moment was a result of something that's happened to them prior to that. Every choice we make in life is a consequence. I eat that extra piece of bacon. I do this thing. I drink too much. I live a stressful life. Over time, all of those things are cumulative. So when we get to the point when there's illness and injury or disease inside of our body, it's a culmination of choices that we had made up to that point. Now, I know you can't go back and change those changes, but what can I do in that moment? Can I change my mindset? Can I look at my body and not see my body as broken, but be able to see my body as whole, be able to see my body as healed? Can I feel that? Can I understand what that feels like to be well? Can I really get a picture and hold that picture in my mind of what it feels like to be well, what it feels like to be strong, what it feels like not even not to be sick, but to be well, to have full health back. What does that look like? How does that feel? And most people can't even imagine what that would be like, much less hold that energy for an extended period of time. Does that make sense?
I can see where and I can see how that would be really hard, because there's stuff happens, and sometimes it's not a result of I did this or I did that. Sometimes it's that vaccine you had as a little boy, or somebody running a red light or whatever.
Right.
We're not responsible for everything. We're responsible for a lot, but we're not responsible for everything. So then when you're left with, now I have to deal with the consequences of somebody, this event happening, that's very difficult, isn't it?
It is very challenging, because my mind's already made up what I'm supposed to be and what's going to happen.
Right.
I'm listening to the people around me say the things that I said. If my grandmother had listened to the doctors, I wouldn't be here. Right?
Right.
So yes, there's information, and I get information, and yet in the end, I make the choice. What is it that what I feel like I need to do the best thing. It's funny, because one of the things that's happening in my practice now is that I actually I have referral work that comes to me from other doctors, sometimes from naturopaths, is where I actually started, because they were in the same mindset as I am. And in allopathic medicine, it's been a little bit slower than this, but healing not only the body, but healing the mind, healing the emotion inside of the understanding of healing, to create a more holistic approach, so that I can remove the cancer in my body and do the radiation and everything else like that. But if there's a belief inside of me that thinks that the cancer is going to come back, it's a good chance it is. If there's a belief inside of me as I'm going through all of this that my mind is so set and so strong and powerful that I can see myself as healthy and whole, chances are there's going to be recovery. And I think this is a part of medicine, and it's a part of life that we're not paying attention to. And then again, I'm saying I might be very controversial about how I see this and I look at this, but this is how I see what I do with people every day, because I know that when the emotion behind something changes, whatever that was holding inside of them goes away. It dissipates. It changes.
Well, James, this has just been a fascinating conversation, and I really appreciate you talking to me. And I also want to thank our listeners for spending time with me during our show, Everyone Dies. You can read our blogs and listen to our other podcasts at everyonedies.org. Thank you to our producer, Jeannie White, and our CEO, Lillian Caldwell. We produce a new show every Wednesday to answer questions related to life-threatening illness, dying, and death. Remember, you can listen to Passionate World Talk Radio on Spreaker and our shows wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic you'd like to discuss on our show, please email me, Marianne at everyonedies.org. That's MARIANNE at EDERY1dies.org. I hope that you live your best life every day. And remember, every day is a gift. Thank you for listening.